Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my mid-month check-in AM reading video for August 2022, I guess. I'm getting this video out a lot later than I hoped to. It's been kind of a crazy week for me, but I'm hoping I can get back on track here and get back into the schedule that I more or less laid out for myself with my August booktube videos, and hopefully update you again a couple more times this month with more reading. But before I get to that, I guess I should get to what I've been reading for the first half of the month. Or actually, I don't think I'm going to get to everything because I'm hoping to, get back to you in like under a week, and so hopefully I'll have new things to talk about then, some stuff that I've started just recently, but I do also have some things I've finished, and I'd like to talk about them now. So stop rambling, self. And I guess before I get started with recapping anything, since this is my first AM reading video of the month, I will point you to my literary newsletter, which I publish every month on my blog, and on that newsletter I talk about my month in reading. I talked about news stories that piqued my interest in July. I have snippets of all the books, reviews of the books I read in July. I have a book quote and book pick and stuff like that, so I'll link that down below. As always, I will start with the next story in this collection of short stories by Dorothy Parker. I have been reading one story per AM reading video since last May, and I am up to The Lovely Leave, which she published in 1943, smack dab in the middle of the war, more or less, for the US. And this is indeed a war story that takes place in the home with a couple. The man is a lieutenant in the army, and the woman is his wife, who is working and waiting and living a lonely existence at home. There's a similarity in this story to a lot of her stories. She is being a little satirical with women and their behavior, but I feel like she has a lot more sympathy for this character than she has for a lot of the other characters she wrote earlier. Maybe sympathy for this situation. Certainly this isn't, party drama or anything. This is about a woman who obviously through the writing has been lonely and just doesn't know how to express herself with her husband, who, has changed so much, since the war. Not so much, this isn't about like PTSD, but the fact that he's been away from her and having these new experiences that she's not part of. So anyway, he calls to say he will have a 24-hour leave with her. This will be his second 24-hour leave, I believe. 6 months ago he had one, and she remembered how shy she was. She grew distant, and she berated herself a lot for, how distant she was with him, and that it wasn't a lovely time. So she endeavors to do better. And she starts by spending a lot of money on a lot of different things, like, dresses and nightgowns for herself and food and, flowers and so forth for the apartment, like so much money that, maybe she'll have to skip lunches for a while or something. And then he comes home and says, well, I'm sorry to say they actually canceled our leaves. I have about like 45 minutes to, collect myself, and then I have to report to the train station. So she reacts with sort of the passive aggressiveness of a lot of Dorothy Parker heroines, but I feel like, well, first of all, she's a lot more self-aware of it. It's a longer story, so she has time to sort of go back and forth with it, like, make sort of caustic remarks about how he's not really noticing much because he, has to keep his eye on the watch, and like he says, oh, I love your dress, I always love you in that dress, and she's like, it is a new dress, like enunciating every word, and every time he brings up, his pilots or anything, she feels jealous of them and the time that they get to spend with him, and then he asks her, what are you doing? And the truth is she's not doing much. She says, I go to work, I come home, I don't go out with people, I don't want to go out with women. And he says, well, there are some men here you could go out with. And she's like, well, what are you saying? And he's like, you could go out to dinner, you don't have to do adultery. So obviously, they're sniping at each other. And it might mostly be her, but at the same time, again, I just feel like, you know, there's a lot more sympathy for what she's going through. So I like that, you know, we could, you know, laugh a little bit at how defensive she's being and how much, you know, at the very end of it, he leaves and a friend calls and she says, you know, she explains that his leave was canceled and says, oh, but we had a lovely time, which was what she was going for. Not sure she actually got it. But again, I like how, you know, we can understand her shortcomings, but I think you have a lot of sympathy for this character as well. Continuing on the theme of marriage of a sort, the first book I finished this month was And the Bride Closed the Door by Ronit Madelon, translated by Jessica Cohen. In fact, it's like very short, like could arguably be novella length, and it is a satirical sort of novel about a woman who on her wedding day decides she's going to lock herself in her room and just decide not to get married. And her family frantically is trying to get her to come out and go through with the marriage. And like her, you know, excuses, if there are any, are very vague. Like she, you know, slides a, you know, a poem out the door that's sort of a adaptation of a famous poem that they're debating what the hell does this mean. And so the in-laws and her mother do a lot of debating, and ultimately like things get more and more ridiculous. Like they call in like this therapist who specifically talks to brides who, you know, decide to, you know, not go through with it, and they can't get into the room, so they call a friend who has access to a Palestinian Authority truck who you can like elevate, you know, a crane up to her window so that the doctor could talk to her through that. And then that gets into the fact that even though this is mostly a domestic novel, you can't get away from the political commentary when, you know, people see a random Palestinian Authority truck on the road and how they're going to, you know, overreact to that sort of thing. And there's other commentary too about parts of Israeli life, but, you know, it is all very slight as well. I do feel like a couple of the characters had a little dimension to them, which was nice for something so small, but I guess ultimately this isn't quite my thing. Maybe it's part of me taking myself too seriously that I want, you know, more time with the characters. I mean, of course I read short stories that are shorter than this and fall for characters, but the satire in this means that there's always a little bit of another agenda, and part of me likes it. I want to remind myself to, you know, laugh at things a bit, like there's a really funny line in here where the doctor gets another call and says, you know, a bride just walked out of the car at her wedding. I need to get it out there immediately, you know. So, I don't know. Then I overthink, well, why would there be, you know, basically a bride whisperer? Why are there so many unhappy brides? What does this say about society? I overthink, I guess. But, I mean, I think it was an interesting little slice of life. This was Madelon's last published novel before she died. She died pretty young, in her 50s. She had cancer. This one, the English translation, was published by New Vessel Press, so I'll link them down below. And I will also be talking more about this book, hopefully, in a couple of weeks, because I read it in part for Women in Translation Month, and so I have another one of her books that I just got out of the library, and so I'll be comparing and contrasting, so stay tuned for more. And next, I more recently finished this book. This is From the Jump by Lacey Walden, who, disclaimer, Lacey and I were part of a writing group together that ended around the time that COVID began, alas, and now she doesn't live in the area anymore, but, you know, around the time that we were meeting was when she got a book deal for 2 books, in fact. This is her second book. Her first book, The Layover, was published last year. It's another breezy romance just like this one. I really like The Layover. I don't know how much of it is biased because I, you know, read like a couple of early drafts of chapters, but I really felt like there was something pretty special there that, you know, Lacey's a flight attendant and her first main character was a flight attendant, and I feel like for a lot of us that's a really intriguing world to be invited into, and it really made a really interesting setup for, you know, getting to know somebody at your job who you might not otherwise know that well, but you get to spend, like, you know, all of this concentrated time with them for like a weekend, extended weekend with a, you know, exotic location at the end of it, because they have this big layover in Belize where a lot of the romantic parts happen. And this book was a little bit marketed as somewhat similar, instead of like, work colleagues who kind of don't know each other that well, and in fact there's a sort of an enemies to romance trope in that one. This one is a friends to romance trope with a group of college friends. 10 years after college, they decide to take this exotic vacation to South Africa, but that wasn't actually a very big part of this book, so I didn't get as much of the wanderlust vibes and fun in this book that I did in the first one. And I feel like there's a lot in here that could recommend this to someone who's an actual romance fan, which I'm not really. I'm not much of a romance fan. It's breezy, and there's a lot of fun quips between the characters, and there's certainly a lot of steaminess between the main character, Liv, and her ultimate love interest, Dice. That's his last name. But I struggled a little bit with the fact that this is supposed to be a close group of friends who've known each other for 10 years, but ultimately I don't feel like there was enough time for, any depth in the relationship. I felt like there was just so much that was a little too surface level for me, and I wish that we could get more, but I don't know if that's my literary brain talking, and you can't slow down the plot by, having too much serious stuff happen in this sort of novel, but it just made me wish that, there was some indication that they did more than just party together, basically. But that also plays into the fact that the two lovers in this case, the reason they didn't get together before this is because they were both kind of distant with each other, and mostly it's Liv, I guess, who's, running the ship here, because she's having this sort of crisis where she's about to lose her home, and she's wondering if this sort of perfect life that she set out for herself is really worth it, because she's doing all this stuff living by the grace of self-help books and self-help podcasts, and she's not actually happy with her life. She feels very distant from anything that feels, joyful. So she has this moment where she decides, I'm going to quit my job that I don't like, and I'm going to actually join my friends on this exotic trip. And that's what sort of starts things in motion. There's another catalyst when they come back that forces her to move in with Dice that I didn't like the specifics of. It's a little too external, out of nowhere plot for me. I wish that Lacey had built up something a little more organic, but that's, I don't know, me quibbling a little. I guess, I definitely didn't like this book as much as the first one, but there are strengths to it, I think, for the genre that it's in. I could see why it's fun to hang out with these people. I like the message that Liv got about, how she really needs to live for herself rather than what self-help tells her she should live for, but I wish it were a little less telegraphed all the time. I feel like the protagonist Ava's journey and the layover, it was a little more subtle in a way what she was going through, so I don't know. In comparison to her own first book, this one comes out a little short for me. Maybe it's a sophomore slump in a way, although I don't know how she feels about the two of them in comparison with each other. What I do know is that her third book is coming out in less than a year. It's coming out in early 2023. And it's, I think, a little bit of a departure from the Wanderlust marketing. It really is supposed to mostly be about people like finding their way home to a small town, so sort of the small town romancy feel. So I'll be interested to give that one a chance. And I'm glad I gave this one a go, even though it wasn't a favorite. And finally, I'll just talk briefly about this book. This is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. This is a nonfiction book about talking about the legacy of slavery, mostly through heritage sites, and talking about how slavery is remembered in America. And that is all I will say about this book here, because I am reading it as a judge for the BookTube Prize Finals in the nonfiction round. So anyway, the BookTube Prize was started a few years ago by Robert at Barter Hordes for bookish members of the online community to read the best in published nonfiction, literary fiction, and translated fiction that was put out in the U.S. last year. So we're at the tail end of a really long process, several months process of whittling down a long list into a short list and finalists and winners for these three divisions. And anyway, I will be able to tell you what I think about this book and the rest of my ballot in October when we hear who won. But in the meantime, if you'd like more of my preliminary thoughts about these books or more information about the BookTube Prize, I'll have some links down below. So that about covers it for me now. I think I might be cutting it short with this battery running out really quickly, and also there is some construction happening right outside my home. I in fact live in a high-rise, but they're doing some construction on the building's facades outside, so like there's cranes and people going up and down outside my window, which is rather unusual being on a high floor of a high rise, but they might be coming soon because they've been coming lately. My cat is at attention right now. So anyway, yeah, I guess it's a pretty decent start to the reading month, or I guess half of the reading month of what I've talked about here. And I look forward to being back with more Am Reading in less than a week. But before that, I hope to be back with another, halfway video. So I do more content than just Am Reading. And I thought I would return to my Would You Read It Challenge videos, where I take a list of books and read the first few paragraphs and discuss them. And in the vein of the BookTube Prize, I'm going to look back at past ballots from past years and read through at least the first few paragraphs, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.